Hi guys, and welcome back to my life. So this episode is actually going to be about reoccurrences, also known as cancer relapses. So a relapse is when a cancer that has gone into remission suddenly comes back. So without further ado, let's step into episode 2. So for me, I was in a remission for about 6 months, and then very close to the anniversary of my original diagnosis, I was told that my cancer has relapsed and it was back. So this time I was 15 years old, and this time I just accepted that it was back. I understood that the treatment would be longer and harsher this time. So in an earlier interview, my dad actually told me the reason why my cancer came back.
They didn't tell us about a drug that was discontinued. There was one that made out of mustard gas, and that the mustard gas was no longer available, so they had to make a synthetic, and they didn't make the synthetic strong enough.
So the drug my dad was talking about, it was actually called nitrogen mustard, and like he said, they had to make a synthetic that actually wasn't strong enough. So when a relapse occurs, this time it doesn't come in stages. It's just a relapse, and they just have to treat it harsher than they did before. This time around, I was not on a St. Jude's protocol. I just had harsher chemo and harsher radiation, and this time I also had a stem cell transplant, which required a different kind of portacath, which was actually called an apheresis catheter, and it was on this side of my body. Normally it's over here, but because of this scar tissue, they wanted to put it over here because it would be dangling out of my chest. So for the first round of chemo, they did the same thing as last time, where I was an outpatient and I would just come into the hospital for the day and get my treatment. Then after that, they would go into the stem cell transplant.
But you were in the hospital for a week for your first round.
No, I wasn't. So when you go into a relapse, the cancer does not come in stages. It's just back, and they have to cure it with... You treat it, you don't cure it. Difference. Treat, cure, total difference. So when a relapse occurs, it doesn't come in stages. This time it's just back, and they just have to treat it with harsher treatments. This time I had harsher chemo, harsher radiation, and they added a stem cell transplant. To keep all this together, my mom made a big binder. It's great. So the plan was that I go through a round of chemo that would last for about a week, and that time it was actually inpatient. I was in the hospital from January 7th through January 15th. From there, we also went into a stem cell collection, which only lasted about a day, but it was still inpatient, and it was very weird. In the stem cell collection, they would actually hook you up to a machine that looks like this. Whoop. And what they do is that they connect the 2 dangling cords that I mentioned earlier. They connect that to the machine, and it extracts white blood cells, red blood cells, or platelets, or a combination of the 3, and they freeze it. And it could last up to decades, but I would only need it to be freezed for about 2 months. So when you have an apheresis catheter in, it's just 2 tubes that dangle out, which means it's not very painful. It is just a lot of maintenance. You have to clean it every day, change the padding. You have to do it with extra sanitary gloves. Did you have fun with those, Dad?
Yeah.
So even though it was a lot of maintenance, it at least didn't hurt. The only pain there was if, like, when it dangled, it would occasionally get caught on something like my clothes, or I accidentally hit it, but it wasn't very painful. I still didn't like it. After the week-long stay with the first round of chemo and the stem cell collection, I went through another round of chemo, and then I went through a few CT and PET scans and saw where my cancer lies. It went into remission after the 2 rounds, which means that I would be going for a month-long stay in the hospital to get my stem cells back. To get the stem cells back, they actually have to do another extremely harsh round of chemo to destroy all of the damaged bone marrow so they could be replaced by the stem cells. So I stayed in the hospital for about a month because my immune system would be lower than ever, and the littlest cough could potentially be very dangerous to me. So while I was in the hospital, they cleaned my room every day, changed my sheets, scrubbed my bathroom from top to bottom, and the cleaning supplies smelled horrible. I hated it. But while I was there, if I were to ever leave my room, I would have to wear a thick BMT mask that had this smell that would make me want to throw up, so I had to hold my breath. And I would always have to wear that mask every day on my way to a playroom while they would clean my room. While I was in the month-long stay, the lowest I got was about 96 pounds, which is extremely light for me considering I normally weigh up to 130 pounds. I'm a strong girl. The reason I was under 100 pounds was because I wasn't eating. It was a combination of being nauseous from all the chemo and the medications, and also being stuck inside the hospital put me into a slight depression, and my appetite was just completely gone. Because I wasn't eating, they had to stick an NG tube up my nose, down my throat, and into my stomach in order for me to get any nutrition into my body. I cried for a day straight until they took it out, and I promised to eat. I promised. I had to force myself, but anything was better than having that tube up my nose. Oh God. Throughout the entire month stay, I was exhausted. All of the medicine did major work on my body, and I would sleep the majority of the days because my body just felt so weak. Often I would feel pain just because my body's weak. I can't stand maybe the weight of my body. I was cold and my body was just in absolute pain, and I would constantly need morphine. And that stuff really works, but I don't want to have to take that again. Even though my cancer had gone into remission again, I would still need to go through radiation just to be sure that it will not come back again. At least not for a really long time. This time the radiation was a little bit more than a month, and it was still harsher than it was before. Each treatment was longer, the rooms were cold, and they had to do it in more areas of my body. Again, my radiation was done just before the summer, and I could reconnect with my friends once I finally felt strong enough. The summer was great, and once it ended, it was back to school. So when I returned to school, my counselors were able to adjust my schedule so I could double up in English and math, so I could catch up to other people in my class and be on track for my graduating schedule. Some people would argue that I could have done online school while I was going through my treatment, but that is not for everybody. I could have done online schooling and still be on track when I came back, but I would rather take classes with sophomores as a junior than deprive the knowledge that I could have gotten. So I hope you guys liked episode 2. Again, I will be linking all the resources that I used in this video in the description below. I found these actually more interesting than I did the last, so I hope you guys find them very informational, and I will see you guys in our next video. Bye! was not cool, Dad. Not cool.
Hey, that was a good memory, though.
Uh-huh.